when I met him in Egypt, the subject was discussed again, and I told him that I hadn't come to Palestine in order to go back to South Africa. He accepted that as a valid reason for not pursuing his offer. And I found somebody quite suitable to edit the paper in South Africa. And that is the reason why when the revisionists and the Irgun in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, had to send an emissary to Jabotinsky to persuade him to replace Bitker. They sent me because Altman was the chairman of the revisionists at the time, had learned apparently from Jabotinsky sufficiently that I had a rapport with Jabotinsky. I had some connection with him, and also they were afraid to go to him. So they sent me to Jabotinsky to tell him what had happened here and to ask him to replace Bitker. I gathered then that it wasn't Jabotinsky who had appointed Bitker. It was the people here, Altman and his friends, who had appointed Bitker, who was originally a Russian, like they were, and somehow they apparently had contact with him. Jabotinsky had not appointed him. In that case, Jabotinsky was not was rather vague about what his exact relationship with the Irgun was. He didn't like the idea of a conspiratorial movement. He wanted a Jewish Legion, as you know. And he always felt uncomfortable with the idea that Jews had to defend themselves, to organize their defense in a clandestine fashion. However, he accepted it in the long run, already in the short run, I suppose. But at any rate, this was my first serious contact with Jabotinsky was in Egypt, when he asked me to act as his secretary while he'd been in Egypt. So of course I agreed. He told me that there were a lot of people in Egypt who he had met, especially during the Legion campaign before they got to Palestine, and there would be a lot of them around who'd like to meet him. And as this visit to Egypt was to be very short altogether, 5 days, he wanted me to be the man who would deal with people that he couldn't see. I was horrified. I said, "How about now? We shouldn't." He said, he was quite severe with me. He said, "I don't care how you do it. Just see to it that I managed to do what I have to do." He had invited representatives of the revisionists, the Kupot Cholim, the National Institute or whatever, and the Irgun, and apparently other groups, I don't know who they were. And he wanted to talk to them. He wanted to hear from them what was going on. And so I took this job on very reluctantly. But I don't remember any problems, except in one case. I had told the telephonist at the hotel, we were in Alexandria, I had given her instructions to put through telephone calls to Jabotinsky to me so that I could deal with him. And So this is what happened. People usually telephoned, and I managed to apparently to do the job correctly. But in one case, a man turned up without having made an appointment. And he said his name was Cornfield or Cornfeld, and he was the vice consul, the American vice consul in Tehran. Now, I thought that the man who's the vice consul abroad, anywhere of the United States, important personality. So I decided, well, I suppose that this is the kind of guy, and he didn't claim any earlier acquaintanceship with Jabotinsky. So I started going off to tell Jabotinsky that he was a man he ought to see. But this guy, foolishly, said to me that he wants Jabotinsky to tell him, to give him a report of what's going on in Palestine. So I stopped in my tracks, turned and said, I don't think Mr. Jabotinsky will be able to see you because he doesn't know. He's come here to find out what's going on in Palestine. Well, this man was very annoyed. He got very red in the face, almost purple in the face. This young whippersnapper telling him what they can't see Jabotinsky. He turned and went off. And so later on, when I saw Jabotinsky was busy at the time, whoever he was busy, I told him this. And I could see that he was slightly taken aback that I turned down a man who obviously of some importance. And so I said to him, there didn't seem any point to it. So he patted me on the shoulder and said, quite right, discipline is discipline, I told you to decide. Having disciplined Jabotinsky. It was during this visit that Jabotinsky told me the last day of our stay there's something else that happened to him. He had a meeting with people of the Histadrut, what were the divisionists, the Histadrut of Dim. And I came into the room to tell him something, and he was talking to these people. One of them, I think, was Shostak. At any rate, as I walked into the room, he said, he'd be talking to them in Russian. When I came to the room, he said to them in Hebrew, Hinei Hazarba. Anyhow, on the last day of his and my stay in Alexandria, he invited me to go for a walk with him on the seashore. And he had with him a friend of his youth named Babkov. And so the three of us walked together along the seashore. And two important things happened. During this walk, he told me that he had 11 novels in his head, but he didn't get time to write any of them. He didn't. And I told him, or rather I asked him, why did he, when he was engaged in his political struggle with Weizmann in the 20s, why did he provoke a quarrel also with the labor people, many of whom were on his side in the dispute with Weizmann? Why did he open the second front? And he laughed and he said, we thought about it, he said. So you think we didn't think about it, thought about it. But there's something you don't know about this. I said, what? And he said, money. He said Weizmann gave him money, provided the money for the kibbutzim and so on, all the organizations of the labor people of Eastern Good. I didn't have any money. Okay. Right. So now we go forward again to Poland, where I came to see him at the behest of the divisionist and the good leadership. Now I remember there were so many things that it was funny about. I didn't know where he was, and they didn't know where he was exactly, and they left it to me to find out where he was in Warsaw. And I knew only one name in Warsaw, a man named Shmuel Katz. Samuel L. Katz it was. I'd never met him, but I knew he was the leader of the business party. So I looked him up in the phone book when I got there. And spoke to him on the phone, and he told me where to find Jabotinsky. I arrived at Jabotinsky's hotel, which was about, I think it was a 2-star hotel, very poor hotel. And the porter gave me the telephone to talk to him on the phone. He was in his room. And so I said to him in Hebrew, Shmuel Katz, and said, Atoni? He talked to everybody. They were on exactly on his level, you see. It doesn't matter whether he was 20 years old or 50 years old, but there was an absolute equality. He said, and this sort of thing, as you see, it was a matter of principle that he carried out automatically. He never looked down on anybody, and the family never looked up to anybody. When I came up to his room, he was packing, and there was a gentleman sitting on the edge of his bed who was occasionally throwing a sock in or whatever into his suitcase. The gentleman was the correspondent of the London Times in Warsaw. He was Count or something like that. I didn't remember the name. And do you know that years later, when I tried to find out from the Times who was their correspondent in Warsaw, never told me. They used to keep it a secret. And they kept it a secret 20, 30 years. Not because of any personal reason. So I still don't know what they were. I don't know if he was friendly with Jabotinsky. And Jabotinsky said to me, look, I'm about to leave on a tour, 3 days. As you come to see me, as you come only to see me, you might as well come travel with me. So I traveled to Jabotinsky for those 2.5 days, 3 days. But he told me to be at the railway station at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I arrived there at 3 o'clock, or a few minutes before 3 o'clock, and there the train was already in, and he was standing on the platform talking to 3 or 4, I can't remember exactly, young men, about my age. When he saw me, when I saw that, I waited at the far end of the platform. When he saw me, he left these boys and he walked up to me. He said, Mr. Katz, can you lend me £5? I was startled. I mean, he didn't know yesterday that I was coming at all. He must have made his financial arrangements. However, I didn't ask any questions. I had money on me. Throughout all this business, I used Haskell's money. I did an account on behalf of Haskell as the secretary of his consulate, you see.
So the South African government was lending this money.
No, Hesketh
personally.
Hesketh was an honorary consul. At that point in his life, he was very well off. He lost a lot of money in subsequent years. However, anyhow, I gave him this photograph and wondered what he was going to do with it. He went up to these boys and handed it to them, saying whatever he was saying. £5 was quite a lot of money in those days. I suppose he knew what they were supposed to do with it. I mean, all of them were starving, none of them was working, none of them was studying. And as far as I know, all of them died in the Holocaust. None of them arrived while I was in Palestine at that time. However, then on the train I told him about the complaints against Bitker and why they wanted him replaced. And he got very angry and said, why did they do that without talking to Bitker himself? He was sure that Bitker would pass on whatever they said to him, and it wasn't right to go behind his back. Well, I kept quiet. I hadn't been asked to decide. I was only asked to deliver a message. However, when he promised that when we got back to Warsaw, he would decide what to do, and he'd let me know then. And so I travelled with him, and he came from Warsaw to Lodz, and from Lodz to what the name of the place? Can't remember. What I remember particularly was the experience in Lodz. He had friends in Lodz, or they were his family in Lodz named Spector, and he was to spend the night there. And when we arrived in Lodz, he took me with him to the Spectors, or they called where they picked him up at the station. Their own son was studying, I think, in Palestine at the time, so they had a room free, which I could use. They were well-to-do people. And they took Jabotinsky and me to the hall when he was supposed to speak. And he was then in the midst of his campaign for evacuation. And so there were tremendous crowds come to the area of the cinema where he was to speak to demonstrate against Jabotinsky, who wanted the Jews to leave the country where they ought to be fighting for their rights. The crowd was so great in front of the cinema that we couldn't get through. So inspectors who knew the geography took us around the back of the cinema, where the crowd was much lighter. Nevertheless, a policeman, a very big policeman, as I remember him, towered above us. And when he first took Jabotinsky, he led Jabotinsky into the hall from the back. Then he came back to us and led Mrs. Spector into the hall from the back. Then he came back and led Mr. Spector in through the crowd, you see. And then he didn't come back. He didn't know me, he knew them. And they put him in police, I suppose. And so I didn't want to stay outside. So I started pushing my way through the crowd. And the policeman, not knowing me, thought I was making trouble. And I was pushing people aside and so on. He didn't ask any questions, gave me one blow, which threw me right across the street. And as I'm saying, he seemed to me to be 3 times my size. And I found myself sitting on the sidewalk opposite the hall. And then Jabotinsky came out from the back of the hall looking for me. And I could see that he wanted to. I was watching him, and I could see that he wanted to laugh. He made such a predicament. And then he called the policeman, spoke to him, and the policeman came to me and led me through the crowd like a little boy. And Jabo, all the Jabo said to me was, always getting into trouble. But the most important thing was the attitude of the crowd in the hall. Now, I think this is the only period in his life as a Zionist, a revisionist, that the crowd was not moved. The crowd was very cold when he raised the evacuation question. There was a lot of propaganda against him going on, of course, in the Zionist movement and in the communist movement, that Jabotinsky was betraying the Polish Jewry who had lived in Poland for 1,000 years, and here he was telling them to get the hell out, which a lot of them, most of them didn't want to do, and they were being told by people, including the Zionists, that they shouldn't do it. I don't say the whole crowd was cold, but there was not the enthusiasm that you expected at a meeting of Jabotinsky's. However, we went on. He made his speech in the next city. I can't remember what. Just don't remember what the name was. It's near the German border somewhere. But it's not important at this moment to tell you. And on the Friday, I had met him on the Wednesday. On the Friday night, we returned to Warsaw. And he was due on Sunday to give me his reply on the requests from Tel Aviv. On the Sunday, when I came to see him in the revisionist office, he said, my reply will be delayed because Mr. Bitker himself has come to Warsaw. So we'll just have to put off my reply. Meantime, he says, when you go out, Mr. Bitker is actually in the next room, he said. So you be careful, he's bigger than you. Poor Bitker. He's such a nice man. And I came through the anteroom where Bitker was waiting. He said to me, is the old man very angry? Then when we met on the Wednesday night, I suppose it was. It was the night before I went back to Tel Aviv. All the things that happened in between, when nothing really happened. I don't know what I did during those days. I wandered around the city and so on. I met some of our people. Little Cook was in Warsaw at the time, and Dubinsky was I have a picture of myself with them in the street in Warsaw. And we went out together one night, but that's all very vague. On the Wednesday night, Jabotinsky had told me to come to his hotel at 8 o'clock. When I came, I got a message that he was held up and would I come back at 10. He had a meeting, as it turned out, with Lubotzky and some of the other people from the Polish government that night. They had dinner together. I came back at 10 o'clock, knocked at the door, and he said, come in. I opened the door and I saw that there was somebody sitting with him, talking to him. So I started withdrawing from the room, from the door. But he motioned to me to come in. So I went in and I sat down in the corner of the room. He continued with his conversation, finished his conversation, and it was after that that I had my talk with him. Now the man who was sitting with him was begging. I hadn't ever talked to Begin. I had met him once in the street, I think, with Hillel Cook, just to make acquaintance with him. 9 years later, this was 37, right? 1946, when I came back to Eretz Israel from England in 1946, and I met Begin for the first time in the underground. As soon as we said hello and so on, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you remember our meeting in Warsaw in 1937? I said, "Sure." I said, "But what you don't know is what Jabotinsky said to me at the moment when you were retreating from the room, and he said to you that you should come in. He whispered to me, 'Don't worry, I have no secrets from him.'" I think I've told you this story, but you want it again. And I think that statement was one of the factors that resulted in 1977 in my being sent out into the political wilderness. He must have taken Jabotinsky seriously. And what Jabotinsky said was the assumption that there were things that Begin didn't know and that I did know, which meant that I was higher in the hierarchy than Begin was. And that was something that Begin couldn't tolerate. Anyhow, he'd agreed to the replacement of Bitker. And a man named Rosenberg took his place afterwards Brazil took his place. And so the next chapter is the police hunt for members of the underground in 1938, when the CID arrested a whole lot of revisionists on the grounds that they had something to do with the moon, which was blowing up atoms in retaliation for actions against the Jews. And one of the leading divisionists at the time was Benjamin Lubotzky, who subsequently took the name Eliav. And he was the regular writer of the political articles in the revisionist paper. I think the paper was called at that time Hayardin. I'm not sure. Must have been. And so he was a prominent, as far as the British were concerned, he was a prominent inciter, because he was obviously writing in favor of the Irgun, one way or another. And in this period, I was living in a pension in King George Street. Right opposite where later on the Knesset had its meetings before the Knesset was built. And I got a message from Lubotzky, Tel Aviv. I can't remember who brought me the message, saying that I must come and get him, asking me. I was in touch with Lubotzky, I should say. We were very friendly, and we corresponded with each other. That he wanted me to get him out of Tel Aviv because the police were on his track. So I went to Tel Aviv. I had the use of a motor car, which I very seldom used. Belonged to high school. I didn't drive myself, and I didn't like the idea of taking the car over. I could have done it, but I was always afraid if anything happened, if there was an accident or anything, it would only complicate my life. I didn't need it for many purposes. But when I got this message, I got hold of the driver, drove to Tel Aviv, and went to his house, to Lubotzky's flat, and was told by his wife, Beba, that he wasn't home, he was on the run. I said to his I told her that he asked me to bring him to Jerusalem, take him from Tel Aviv. So she gave me an address where he was, she believed that he'd gone. And there I was told that he had already moved on, he had been there and had left, but that they knew that the police were after him. They had apparently reached that first hiding place. Finally I got to him and brought him to Jerusalem. He told me that he intended leaving the country and wanted to go back meanwhile to Latvia, which was his place of birth. But he had to go and have his papers brought up to date, passport brought up to date, not quite clear, at the Latvian consul, who was a man named Caspi, the grandfather of the lawyer, father of a lawyer, grandfather of a lawyer, and I think the great-grandfather of a lawyer. He himself was a shipping agent. However, he was in the same building as I had my office, the Generali building. And then I told Lubotzky to keep under cover and not to move around. But he said he had to go to Caspi because he wanted to leave. I told him, wait, it's still hot, they're still after you, this will die down. He didn't listen to me. So he went to Caspi, made arrangements, and apparently he was seen by somebody who knew him. These things, it's very peculiar. There was always somebody inside that was in contact with the police. I think it was somebody who worked in the pension. Must have known about him. And so on the Saturday night, this was on the Friday, I brought him in on Thursday, and this was on the Friday that he went to see Caspi. And on the Saturday night, the police surrounded the whole block, started searching. I presume that people had seen him walking into some door and perhaps had not given any precise instructions, or maybe it was just a show that the police made, I don't know. I didn't know if they reached the fourth floor where my pension had an apartment, kind of annex to the pension. And in this annex, next door to me, there was a fellow named Goldberg, a lawyer. In another room, there were two students at the Hebrew University, and one room was empty, and I got that room for Jabotinsky. Okay. When the two detectives arrived here, they inquired as to who lived in these rooms. And I told them there were two students. Where were they? I said they were in Tel Aviv for the weekend. Where was Mr. Goldberg? Mr. Goldberg was in Bet Akerim, I said, where he had a sister. He's staying there for the Shabbat. And who's in this room? This room, I said to Mr. Cohen, who'd come here for some medical treatment. As it happened, that the last part was true. Lubotzky had something wrong with his tummy. He had to see a doctor. He was taking pills and things. Now the detective, whose name as I gathered was Simmons or Simpson, I don't remember, I've got it in my book. And they apparently knew they couldn't do anything to me. I had to consider status. I didn't know, they hadn't heard that I was blowing anybody up anyhow. And so Mr. Simmons, or Simpson, or whatever his name was, started walking into the Goldberg's room. And I said, look here, I can't give you permission to go into his room. And I don't think you're entitled to go into his room without a warrant. He didn't pay attention. I said to him, this man just happens to be for the weekend at his sister's house. Walks in, and his sidekick, a younger policeman, detective, and walks straight up to the bed. His standard procedure in such cases, apparently, picks up the cushion, and underneath the cushion there's a pair of pajamas. And he says to me in a very, very shrill voice, I thought you said that he was in Peter Kerem at his sister's. Here are his pajamas. And I said to him, you know, I've heard of people who have two pairs of pajamas. What worse could I have? How worse could I have behaved? He went red, angry as hell. You don't talk to policemen, what to do? However, they walked into Lubotzky's room, and they weren't there more than 5 minutes, and he broke down. He admitted that he was Lubotzky. He was the man they were looking for. They arrested him, and he made a deal with them subsequently. He left the country, stayed out of the country for a couple of years. When he came back, I was already in London, and I had a telegram from him from Sofia. He had decided to go back after the war broke out. I don't know how he got to Sofia, but he did that out. And he did get there, and he sent me a telegram asking me to send him £5 because he needs it to get back to Tel Aviv. So I gave him £10, sent him £5, which is enough for a journey from wherever it was in Southern Europe. Which of course he never went back.
Well, by then you were famous as the man who gives £5 to everyone.
And it was the last heard of Lubotzky at that time, because he comes into the picture very, very very much on the fringes. So they had no dealing with him subsequently. He turned left. I saw him after I got back to, but that was in 1946. I went to see him soon after I arrived, and we had quite a friendly talk. But in 1948, you know, I never went physically underground. And I came down Rothschild, called the Rothschild Allenby. I think it's still a taxi company there. And there were stairs leading into the taxi company. As I came past, I remember it was raining like hell, at the beginning of 48. And there at the top of this few stairs was Lubotzky. And you know, he stared right through me and didn't greet me. I suppose he then understood that I was acting on the wrong side from his point of view. I never saw him again. That was that in 1937. That was 37. I visited to Poland was 37.
But Lubotzky was 38.
What's that?
Lubotzky was 38.
Yes, but my own connection with the events was still connected with 37. But actually, you're right, I don't think there's anything to say about 1937. In 1938, my encounter with these detectives and my obvious lie when I told him this man was cold, put them on the alert apparently as far as I was concerned. And a couple of days after my encounter, a very good friend of mine, who was also quite a guy, a very interesting personality, named Jack Simon, who was the correspondent of the United Press, and who had all kinds of connections with the police and the detectives and the Arabs. He was a perfect Arabic speaker. Told me that I had been put on the list. He didn't know of anything about what had happened between me and the police. That I had been put on the list of people whose phone just had to be tapped. Together, as he showed me at the time, was a man named Marcos, who was the secretary of the Italian embassy. He got the information about both of us. I decided that, in a sense, this had blown my status as a consular official.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Haskell's affairs, I know, have been going down. He was losing money. He was heavily invested in 2 gold mines, which didn't produce much gold. And so I wrote to him and told him that, and again, there had been a change of government in South Africa, and the earlier relations with the government had, of course, disappeared. Also, my own reports, I forgot to mention that I used to send a monthly report to the government on political developments here. I couldn't continue with them because the people involved were different people. I suggested to him that he'd better shut the shop. Not just throwing away money now.
Mm-hmm.
So he suggested that I come back to South Africa and make the necessary arrangements. As I got back to South Africa in October 1938, I arranged with Haskell that we should close the shop, so to speak, give ourselves 3 months to make all the necessary arrangements. I would have to make here the changes and the official arrangement. I had to give back documents and passports and so on. I said, I think 3 months will do it. So we were due to complete our arrangements. The end of February, I think, we fixed.